now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Yider Insurance Group, Forward Corporation and T.R. McTaggart, Primal Tree Stands, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polarcraft Boats, Shadow Hunter Blinds, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, and welcome to another edition of the Outdoor Magazine show right here on the Outdoor Magazine Radio Network. So glad to have you along with us as we continue to work our way through the winter. I mean, it's mid-January now, right? But does it feel like mid-January? Does it really feel like we're having much of a winter? And obviously, that's going to depend on where you live in our great state of Michigan, if you're listening to the broadcast version of the show, which is heard on many, many AM and FM stations across our great state of Michigan. But I just don't feel like we're having winter like we used to. And I'm not one of those people who's going to buy into the, global warming and all that stuff. But you can't argue the fact that we don't have winters like we used to. Man, when I was a kid growing up, we would get snowstorms that would just shut things down for days. In the part of the state that I live, I just don't see that as much anymore. Not that I'm complaining. As I get older, I'm less interested in snow and ice than I was when I was younger, but I know that many of you are interested in snow and ice. And I just don't feel like we see it to the extent that we used to. And of course, that's one of those things that there's absolutely nothing we can do anything about. And I'll go back to that's one of the reasons why I love this whole lifestyle of the outdoors, of hunting and fishing and shooting and trapping and being outdoors, because we depend on Mother Nature. And there is absolutely nothing we can do about snow, temperatures, ice conditions, wind direction, wind speed. There's nothing we can do about it. And in today's technologically advanced world, where we get so spoiled in that we push a button and a screen comes on, we swipe our fingers and it goes to something else. I mean, we are so used to instant gratification in today's world that I think it's nice to realize that there are things bigger than us. And I think it's nice, and I think it's a welcome reprieve from the modern digital world to get out in the real outdoors and get cold and get uncomfortable and get wet and have to deal with Mother Nature. I like it. And I know many of you do as well. I am really missing this year the lack of the outdoor shows, the hunting and fishing shows that we would see across the state this time of year, where you could, go and talk to the outfitters and get some great deals on tackle and gear and listen to the seminars and run into your buddies. And I'm really missing those. I understand why we can't do them, and I think it's going to be a long time before we can again. But I'm missing that. And I also, I can't say I missed the ATA show this year, the Archery Trade Association show, because I think the viability of that show was going downhill anyway. And now I think the industry, the archery industry, and all outdoor industries have proven that you don't need to have a trade show where you get together to show off your new wares. So I think those have become, I think the future of those is very much in doubt. But the ATA show is where companies traditionally introduce and unveil their new products. And being a big bow guy, a big archery guy, I looked forward to the ATA to see what new products were coming out. But virtually, online this year, 2 new products have got my attention. One is a new crossbow from Excalibur. And I think the thing that I think the introduction of new crossbows in my mind this year is a bigger deal than compounds or traditional equipment. A dual fire crossbow from Excalibur. It's called the Excalibur Twin Strike. You load 2 arrows or bolts, if you want to call them that. I prefer to call them arrows. You load 2 arrows into this crossbow. Now, I thought it allowed you to shoot one and then the other back to back. You can actually shoot them at the same time. So this is a crossbow that allows you to sight on a critter, pull the trigger, and throw 2 arrows downrange toward the critter at the same time. Now, it'll cost you $2,000 for the privilege of being able to do that. The other one that has my attention, it's the new Raven crossbows in general, and some of those will cost you $3,400. But they're marketing them as your next rifle. Now, they'll shoot 500 feet per second. I am a huge fan of crossbows. I love crossbows. I have hunted with them a lot. I have taken a lot of game with them, deer, turkeys, and bear. And I think they are excellent, wonderful tools. And I think they belong in the Michigan woods. Because the goal as hunters should be to make a quick, clean, humane killing shot whenever possible. Things are going to happen. You're going to have deflections. You're going to have deer are going to duck or whatever, and it's not always going to happen. But the goal is to make a quick, clean, humane killing shot. And I believe crossbows allow hunters to make that quick, clean, humane killing shot more often, more effectively, and easier. Because face it, especially in today's world, when people's time is fragmented and you're being pulled in many different directions, you probably don't have the time to practice with your bow that maybe you would like. And that crossbow will allow you to make that good, clean killing shot without as much practice. And some people will say, well, that's not good. I think it is good. I like crossbows. I've hunted with crossbows, and someday I'll get to the point where I can't shoot my recurve anymore, and I will go back to a crossbow, and I will be completely happy to do it. But I do have to wonder, at what point do we have to look at this and say, maybe we're going too far? Now, if you go back to the premise that the goal is to make hunters as effective as possible, then I think you would have to embrace this dual fire crossbow and embrace a crossbow that'll shoot 500 feet per second. I checked with the DNR, by the way, and that crossbow is legal. The one that shoots 2 arrows at once. Now think about this. I don't care if it's a turkey, a bear, a deer, or whatever. If you've hunted with a bow, you know the damage that an arrow and a broadhead can do. And if you're throwing 2 arrows at a critter, it could be devastating. I mean, hopefully it would increase the recovery rate. So again, from that perspective, you have to endorse it. I do have a problem with Raven marketing their bows as your next rifle, though. That makes me nervous. So it's a discussion that we as bow hunters, the DNR, the Natural Resources Commission, the legislature, eventually, as technology continues to evolve, I know it's going to get looked at. Maybe it's good, maybe it's bad. Technology for technology's sake is not necessarily bad. Making hunters more effective is not bad. But there are going to be a lot of people in this state who say, man, not just this state, across the country, who say, when is enough enough? Personally, I'm going to stick with my recurve. And again, I have nothing against crossbows and certainly compounds. I went to a recurve a couple of years ago just because I wanted something different. And word this week that I got to be honest, breaks my heart. And I just found out about this as I walked into the studio. Michigan-based Predator bows made by Hunter's Niche has shut down. And I hunt with a Predator bow. Breaks my heart. I'm hoping somebody can come in and pick that back up because they make a wonderful product. And it's always sad to see a company And I'm sure a lot of it was COVID related and such. But I'm looking forward to turkey season. Turkey season is a couple months off, right? 2.5, 3 months, whatever it is. But I'm looking forward to turkey season. I will get ZZ, once again, the Southern Michigan private land hunt, which this year I think is now a 6-week hunt. So there's no reason not to get ZZ. Last year, for the first time, ZZ sold out because people were off work because of COVID. And there were more people in the woods. And fishing licenses went up. And hunting license sales went up. And it's all good. The promotion for the Wraith 270 see-through ground blind continues. Go to outdoorpregame.com, outdoorpregame.com. Use the promo code Mike20. You can get one for $200. A lot cheaper than a Raven crossbow. Coming up on this week's Outdoor Magazine show, after the break, I'm going to check in with Paul Schlafly of Riverside Charters in Manistee to see how the wintertime steelheading is going. Drew Youngdyke of MUC with, he's with National Wildlife Federation, with what appears to be finally some good news about Asian carp, the Brandon Road Lock and Dam. Tom Campbell of Woods and Water News looks at their February edition. And hour number 2, Nick Ostroski talks about hunting coyotes with dogs. He talks about hunting wild boars in Michigan. Are there any left? Nick Green with a couple of important issues, this week's Ask Avery segment. And in hour number 3, Richard P. Smith talks about a deer hunt he had in the UP last fall where he didn't recover the animal, but wolves did. And wild game chef Dave Minar has a great pike recipe. That's all coming up this week right here on Outdoor Magazine. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the show on great AM and FM stations across the great state of Michigan. The podcast also available anywhere you get your podcasts. Best way to listen, though, is on your local AM or FM station. You get your local news, weather, sports, even your local commercial spots. Plus, the radio stations air the show before the podcast is uploaded. Those stations include WZTK in Alpena, that's 105.7 FM. Also, WIOS in Tawas, 1480 AM, 106.9 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in Marquette on WDMJ, that's 1320 AM. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you in part by Speedy Blaze. Speedy Blaze is a safe, clean, water-resistant alternative to firewood. It's safe to cook over because it's made from recycled hardwood. You can put it in your fire pit, in your fireplace, in your grill, anywhere you can burn wood, you can burn Speedy Blaze. It is water resistant, insect resistant, so you can take it across the bridge to the UP, and you can learn more at speedyblaze.com. That's speedyblaze.com. And for the next several weeks, we will be giving away Speedy Blaze as part of our Wednesday Night Live. Wednesday Night Live, something I do every Wednesday night on all of my social media outlets, on the Facebook page, on YouTube, on Vimeo, and on Twitter. Not on Instagram yet. Still trying to figure out a way to make that happen, and not having a lot of luck, but I'll continue on that. We're trying to get a hold of Paul Schlafly of Riverside Charters in Manistee at riversidecharters.com. Now, when Paul is on the river, he's just a quick phone call away. Boom, we call him and there he is. But I think he may have forgotten about us this morning, Charlie. which Charlie says, "Oh, I'm glad I'm not you right now." I first met Paul, how many years ago was it? I don't know, 25 years ago. Just from hanging around Manistee and fishing in Manistee. And I had a chance to spend some time on the water with him on the big lake. And one trip in particular, it was a springtime trip for brown trout. So we were trolling. I don't remember what boat he had, but it was a pretty good sized boat at the time. And we were trolling up in the shallows for browns, steelhead if we could find them too. Running big planer boards, the big skis with body baits in the troughs between the sandbars. And the fishing was okay. I mean, I thought it was good. Paul thought it was okay. But, he can catch fish in a bathtub like most of those guys can. And we brought in a big brown, and he looked at that thing. He said, "That's a nice fish." And he threw it in the cooler. I said, "Hey, that's the biggest brown I've ever seen." We put it on a scale, and it was 20 pounds. So for a guy like Paul Schlafly, a 20-pound brown, that's a nice fish. For me, it was like the fish of a lifetime. Oh, all right. So listen, it looks like I'm going to have time to talk about a couple of other things while we're seeing if we can get Paul on the air here. I mentioned I was looking forward to turkey season. The Wraith promotion is still going on. Also, it looks like our Ohio hunt for next year is full. A group of us got together. We're going to go down and hunt with Bill Piles of Ohio Bow Hunting Outfitters, ohiobowоutfitters.com. And it looks like that trip is full. If you did not provide your email to me, you said you were interested but didn't give me your email, I'm afraid you're not going to be able to get in on that for this year. I suspect, though, that this is probably something that will continue on a yearly basis. Charlie, just for grins, there's his mobile number. You want to give him a try on that? Also, I was going to talk about this later in the show, but I'll bring it up right now. I was talking last week about the ammo shortage and how tough it is to get ammunition. I was lucky enough to find a new gun, though. I bought this for a member of my family who is a little bit recoil shy and has a hard time manipulating some of the semi-auto guns. This person, the last time they shot, they were using one of my... I can't think of the name of it right now. But they had a hard time manipulating it. So I found a Smith & Wesson Easy in a 380. A 380 has less recoil. I would not go below, and I don't pretend to be a ballistics expert, but I wouldn't go smaller than a 380 for a personal protection handgun. That's just my way of thinking. Also, and again, I don't pretend to be an expert, but I have some experience from a non-military and non-law enforcement, so a civilian perspective. I don't like safeties on personal protection handguns because the average person, me included, does not train enough with a safety that I feel comfortable with it. Now, your safety is your trigger finger and your brain, right? That's your real safety, right? You keep your finger off the trigger until you need it, in theory. But I'm just afraid that if you ever, God forbid, had a situation where you actually had to use a gun to defend yourself, the last thing I want to be worried about is a thumb safety. That's just me. Your mileage may vary. So we got this Shield 380 EZ, and I tell you, I'm very, very happy with it. Now the challenge is to find ammo, right? I can't find any 380 ammo or any 9mm ammo. So if you've got some you want to trade for some 223, give me a call. All right, we tracked Paul down. Paul, welcome back to the Outdoor Magazine show. How are you?
Good, Mike. How you doing?
Real good. Listen, so you're not on the river this morning, obviously.
No, I wish I was, man. It's a nice day out today. Just for this time of year, it's been beautiful.
Yeah. And how's the fishing been, Paul?
It's been up and down. The fish are just kind of trickling in. The river's real low and clear right now, so it's just no major push of fish coming in. But seems like one day you'll do all right, and the next day's tougher. It's been kind of how it's been the last month, with all the low, clear water we're dealing with. But it's normally froze up this time of year, so yeah. I guess be blessed that guys can get out fishing for sure. Yeah.
And the river, of course, we're talking about is the Big Manistee. That's your second home.
Yep, for sure.
How many years you been fishing out there, Paul?
Oh, I've been guiding since '83. So of course, I fished since I was a kid. So I grew up right in Manistee. So I was blessed to grow right up in this area.
Oh man, yeah.
Fish is fishery, that's for sure.
One of the best big water ports and one of the best rivers in the state, right there in your backyard.
Exactly. Yeah, the river. We got two really good rivers here: the Little Manistee and the Big, and of course Lake Michigan's real good, and it's good fishing throughout the whole year. Generally, there's always something going on here, anyways. Do you fish the Little Manistee at all? I mean, I have, not for guiding wise, just for pleasure. But yeah, there's definitely some nice fishing in that river. smaller river, wader fishing, and of course you got other good rivers close too. The Pere Marquette and Betsy, and I mean there's just all kinds of good fishing in the area. What's not that far away, really.
Yeah. So you're actually then you can. If the weather continues the way it is, you're going to be able to book people maybe for several more weeks yet.
Exactly. Yeah. It's normally January is kind of a slow month because the weather is usually cold, but this year it's been kind of crazy. It's the first year I remember since I've ever lived that the Manistee River channel hasn't froze up yet. By now, it's generally always froze up, but not this year. It's wide open water. So. What
about ice on the big lake out by the pier heads?
There's nothing. I mean, the lake, you could go out fishing there right now, and I could get out there and go fish. Probably good fishing out there right now.
That's what I'm thinking. You got fish out there. You got the water to yourself, and probably almost nobody's out there.
Exactly. Oh yeah, there would be probably nobody. It's kind of be a different year. I mean, if we don't get any winter, it's going to be kind of hard to say what will be going on in the big lake. We might have salmon as soon as we get out there. It's just the last time we had a real mild winter like this, the king showed up real early for us, and we had some really good fishing.
Really?
Yeah. So who knows? Every year is different. But.
Well, every year is different, but when you look back on your probably almost 30 years now on the water, there's got to be certain things you look for, and you say when you get a mild winter, the kings show up earlier. What else do you look for, Paul?
I mean, it's water. For the river, you're looking for water and water temp. It's going to be kind of a strange spring. It's hard to say what will happen, with the run this year. Fish are kind of trickling in all winter now, and they're being fished all winter, so it could be a different run this year, but who knows? We'll probably get winter yet. I mean, February could definitely get hit hard all of a sudden, and then we'll get winter.
Do steelhead in the river, did they get spooky when they're fished hard?
Oh yeah, most definitely. If they start getting a lot of pressure on them, and especially in low clear water, it can get tough. I mean, it can be really good and tough. It's fishing pressure does definitely affect them. In my opinion, it does, but. Normally in the winter time, it can be really good fishing because there's a lot less fishing pressure on them, and you can have some really banner days. But I don't think that'll happen. No pressure wise, I think the fish will have somewhat fishing pressure on them throughout the whole winter this year.
So then, what do you go to in that low clear water? What's your technique?
Usually float fishing with spawn or jigs or beads. That's kind of three main things we'll run. Depending on what water I'm fishing and where I'm at, but generally the float fishing, the fish are real spooky, and it's probably the most effective way. At least that's the way I like to fish when it's clear and low. And if the water starts getting murked up, then of course there's other techniques, plug fishing and different kinds of styles of where the fish, when the plugs you put it right in their face in dirtier water, where bobbers they can just see everything. In this clear water, they can see everything, so the bobbers and that floats work real good.
Well, and using floats or bobbers is a lot of fun because everybody can relate to that. I mean, you're drifting along, you watch a bobber go down, boom, it could be a fish.
Exactly, yep. Definitely a good way to fish them.
All right, so Paul, your website, riversidecharters.com, riversidecharters.com. If somebody goes there right now, can they see what openings you have and even book a trip with you?
Yep. We're fishing right now, and we can hook them up and get out in the water for sure.
Are you booking big water trips yet?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, we're putting dates in the book right now, and starting to fill up. The summertime gets real busy, so a lot of people pre-book. Some people a year in advance. So.
Well, and now's a good time to do it because Paul is a well-known captain. Paul, appreciate your time. Paul Schlafly, riversidecharters.com, riversidecharters.com. Go to the website if you want to fish wintertime steelhead with Paul, springtime steelhead with Paul, or even book a big lake trip. Now is the time to do that because his schedule will fill up fast. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, Drew Youngdyke of the National Wildlife Federation with what finally could be some news about the battle against Asian carp. you can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Battle Creek on WBCK. That's 95.3 FM. You can hear us in Caro on WKYO 1360 AM and WIDL 92.1 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge. Let's go to Iron Mountain, WMIQ 1450 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by MUCC's On the Ground program. OTG is a program to improve habitat for fish and wildlife across the state. For details, check out the Michigan United Conservation Club's website. It's mucc.org, mucc.org. And don't forget, use the promo code MIKE, all caps, MIKE, to save 25% on your MUCC membership or renewal. MUCC.org, promo code MIKE, all caps, save 25%. I want to turn our attention now to a guy who used to work with MUCC, now with NWF, the National Wildlife Federation, a friend of mine, Drew Youngdyke. Drew, welcome back. How are you?
Great, Mike. Happy New Year. Happy to be back.
Always a pleasure. Happy New Year to you. And this time, you bring us what appears to be, Drew, some good news.
Oh, yes. And Mike, we've talked about this so many times, how many different parts of the process we're trying to see get done piece by piece in the effort to keep Asian carp out of the Great Lakes. And I think Dan Eichinger, my old boss at MUCC and the current director of the DNR, put it best. When it comes to that Brandon Road plan to keep Asian carp out of Lake Michigan, he said, we're not at the end of the trail, but we finally got to the trailhead. And that was encouraging news. So, yes, what happened was the state of Illinois, along with Michigan and the Army Corps of Engineers, all agreed on what's called a pre-construction engineering and design plan, which sounds like a pretty boring administrative phase, but it means they can actually get started designing that lock and dam structure and getting started on some of the parts of building it.
So yes, so that is good news. My question is, though, with a change in administration, with a new Congress, could the funding for this somehow go away?
No. What will happen? Actually, Congress too. The other part that we needed Congress to actually approve the plan. They did that in the Water Resources Development Act, which was passed just before the end of the year as well. So this has been passed. What will happen is they'll need to appropriate year by year the actual funding for it. The funding for it has been authorized by that Water Resources Development Act, but every Congress, no matter who's in, every year has to appropriate the funding. What we've seen, though, with Asian carp is the holdup actually hasn't been in Congress. The holdup had been with the state of Illinois, and now that's no longer the holdup. And so what we've seen is, regardless of whether it's Republican or Democrat, the Great Lakes delegation from both parties of members in Congress have ensured that the funding for this keeps moving, have ensured that the support for this in Congress keeps moving. And kind of the new thing that we've seen is we've built national support for this. That's why this was able to get done. That WRDA package also included $25 million to help deal with Asian carp down south. So we're getting support from the South for what we're doing here to keep them out of the Great Lakes, because we're giving them support for their efforts down there from our Great Lakes region. So as long as we keep that, this has been a pretty bipartisan issue, and as long as we can maintain that, we can keep this train rolling.
Drew, remind us, why is this Brandon Road lock and dam? Why is this such an important part of this puzzle?
So this is the most likely place that Asian carp would get from the Mississippi River watershed into the Great Lakes watershed. It's a choke point about 50 miles south of Chicago, and it's a place where if we can block them there, it's before the Chicago area waterway system branches out into multiple different channels where it connects to Lake Michigan. So it's kind of a choke point where if we can cut them off there, we can keep them from getting into Lake Michigan. It's an existing lock and dam, and what this plan will do is basically rebuild that lock and dam to include an engineered channel with a suite of different technologies. I call it like a gauntlet. It will have an electric barrier, acoustic sound deterrent, flushing lock, and a water jet barrier as well as non-structural measures like increased monitoring and sampling and that kind of thing. Those non-structural measures actually can begin almost immediately. And the way they're going to build this project is actually in a layered approach. It may take 6 to 8 years before it's done completely, but they're going to build, for instance, like the electric barrier might come first, and that will be done pretty soon, and that will be functional and operational, and then they'll start adding those other parts of that barrier, as next, so that we're not waiting till the whole thing is done before it's able to stop carp. It's going to, each part of each layer of that plan is going to start going in piece by piece sooner rather than later.
It sounds like they're going to throw every amount of technology they can think of into this project.
They are. Electric barrier is something that they've done before. They know how to do that. Some of the other things, like an acoustic barrier, like an underwater acoustic, basically speakers blowing a specific frequency that deters carp, they've actually got one of those installed in that they're testing down on Kentucky Lake in one of the dams there. So they're testing that type of technology. There's more research. That's part of the cost of this is they have to test new research. They have to research new technology and build new technology and figure out how to make it work. But they've got electric barrier technology. They'll include that. They're testing out the acoustic barrier. They'll include that. They'll develop and test water barrier technology. And there's flexibility in this plan, too. This is really important. In the Water Resources Development Act, there's flexibility for the Corps. If a new technology comes along that they find works better, they'll be able to substitute that without having to go back to Congress for approval. Good
deal, Drew. I appreciate the update on this. Always a pleasure to check in with you. Drew Youngdyke of the National Wildlife Federation, the website nwf.org, nwf.org. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, wrap up this first hour with Tom Campbell, as I suspect he's going to take a look at the February edition of Woods and Water News. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. So glad to have you along with us. You can hear the show in St. Joe on WSJM 94.9 FM. You can hear us in Sandusky on WMIC AM and FM 660 AM 95.3 FM. And you can hear us north of the bridge in the Sioux on ESPN 1400 WKNW. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Boning Archery. Michigan-based Boning Archery is celebrating 75 years in the archery industry this year. What a tremendous accomplishment that is. Congrats to everybody at Boning Archery. Everything for bows and arrows except bows and arrows. I mean, Roland Boning invented Ferrule-Tite 75 years ago. They've been leaders, innovators ever since then. Congrats to them. Keep an eye on the website, boning.com, bohning.com, boning.com for some celebrations and some more information on this 75th anniversary, boning.com. While you're online, check out my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com, and go over to woods-n-waternews.com, the website of Michigan's premier outdoor publication. Tom Campbell with Woods and Water News with us once again. Tom, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. But this year, Tom, I'm already missing our shows where we get a chance to talk to people and walk around. It just it doesn't seem it's disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah, it just doesn't seem right. No, you're right. And hopefully the Ultimate Fishing one in Novi has been rescheduled, so hopefully we'll be able to see everybody in March. But we're certainly going to miss all those. The ones over at the Deltaplex, Tom Antor's Hunting Time Expo's been postponed, and we got to watch your website to see what they're going to plan there. They're looking out the alternative dates for sure. But
But in the meantime, you guys at Woods and Water News aren't just sitting back drinking coffee, are you?
No, we are not. We are not. Every day we usually have a talk about the outdoor weekend in September, and I don't know. Lately, the talks, you just start thinking, "There's no way we cannot. We got to have it. We got to have 2021. There's just no way it's possible." So we're going to be positive, and like we started the year last year, 2020. We're going to go as if things are great, and we're going to plan it. And I know our vendors are excited, and it should be a good show. And we're going to do everything we can to make it a great show.
Well, and I know you will. And in the meantime, you've got this little thing called a monthly magazine that has to get put together.
Exactly right. Absolutely. As we talk right now, Mike, you should be able to find the February issue just starting to hit your favorite newsstands, or it would be in the mail. Of course, that's another issue we don't want to talk about, and the delays in the mail through November, December, and for our subscribers of Woods and Waters has been awful, to say the least. So we've been dealing with the post office. The pandemic that they're under too, they've got problems, and of course the incredible Christmas rush, and so it delayed a lot of our subscribers. But for everybody else, it should be there, and it should be in the mail, and it's loaded with great information, and everybody should take time to pick it up and take a look at it for sure.
Tom, at one time you were very interested in the concept of a digital edition, but I don't feel like that ever took off like you had maybe hoped it would.
Exactly right. We would love it, and it certainly has grown. There's no doubt about it. It's grown in combination now. People don't want to give up their hard copy, their actual issue in their hand, but at other times, maybe they left the issue home and they can go online to the website and pull it up real quick and read while maybe they're working or whatever. But yeah, combinations just seem to work. Yeah, 5 years ago we thought this was going to be the rage. Digital was the rage. It's still great to have, and it's never going to go away, I'm sure. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Mike. Not quite the way we thought it would take off.
But I think that's a tribute to you guys in that people have become so attached and so addicted to this big full color magazine that shows up once a month. Some things just don't necessarily translate to online, and I think maybe Woods and Water News might be one of those.
I think you're exactly right, Mike. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think you're right. It's become a tradition. There's no doubt, and people love to see it and feel it. And the great thing is, I hear from so many people now and you can see it by our trophy page, the youth and the young people that are sending photos. And if we can attach them to reading a physical magazine like Woods and Water News, I think that would be great for everybody.
It might be the only physical thing they read, Tom.
That's right. That'd be okay with us.
Real quick, what are we going to see in the February edition?
Well, I tell you, we're loaded. Of course, we're still following some great bucks that have been taken and through the 2020 season, and Rachel Wheeler's monster buck she took down in Berrien County is highlighted this year. And we got a real great newsy tip from Richard Smith that there might be mandatory deer registration by 2022 in the state of Michigan. Kind of interesting. Yeah. It's kind of been, so that's always great. And of course, we've got bear updates by Richard Smith again, and great fishing, ice fishing. I think we're going to get some ice around here in southern Michigan sooner. I believe it's been a little slow developing.
Well, we've got Richard on in the third hour of this week's show. I will make sure to ask him about that, but I won't have him tell us everything, because we got to leave some reason for people to read the magazine.
You got it. That's right. Appreciate that.
All right, Tom. Always a pleasure. The website, woods-n-waternews.com. You and I will talk again soon. Keep up the good work.
Great. All right. Thanks, Mike. You too.
Tom Campbell of Woods and Water News, woods-n-waternews.com. We'll take a break for the top of the hour. When we come back, Nick Ostroski talks about hunting coyotes with dogs. Also, wild boars in Michigan. Where did they go? Maybe wolf hunting. Nick has killed legally a Michigan wolf. Then Nick Green of MUCC and this week's Ask Avery segment. All coming up after the break. The top of the hour right here on Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Yider Insurance Group, Forward Corporation and T.R. McTaggart, Primal Tree Stands, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polarcraft Boats, Shadow Hunter Blinds, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Indeed, this is the big guy, Mike Avery, and I want to welcome you to hour number 2 of this week's Outdoor Magazine show right here on the Outdoor Magazine Radio Network. So glad to have you along with us as we continue to work our way through what on the calendar is winter. Now, maybe in the parts of the state where you live, it is indeed winter, but there's no doubt that across much of our state so far, I don't really feel like we've seen much of a winter. And personally, I'm okay with that, but if I was relying on snow or ice for my outdoor adventures, I would be more disappointed, that's for sure. Yeah, I mentioned this is the second hour of the radio show. Outdoor Magazine is first and foremost a radio show. It is produced, recorded, scheduled, distributed as a radio show to be heard on your local AM or FM station, and I do think that's the best way to listen if you can. If your local station doesn't carry all 3 hours of the show, or if you live in some part of our state not covered by the broadcast signal, you can always listen to the podcast version of the show. The podcast is available on my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. It's available on my Facebook page, on Amazon Music, on Audible. Audible. Now, Audible's a big one. I listen to a lot of Audible books, so it's pretty cool to be on Audible. On my Avery Outdoors Twitter feed. It's on LinkedIn. It's on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Player FM, Deezer, Radio.com, and I even put it on YouTube. Now, why do I put a radio show on YouTube? I don't know, but the option was there, so I clicked the button, and it's on YouTube as well. So lots of ways to listen to the podcast version of the radio show if you can't hear the radio show directly. I also do monthly podcasts for Jay's Sporting Goods, Offshore Tackle, Angler Quest Boats, Killer Food Plots, Polar Craft Boats, quarterly podcast for MUCC, and when we get done today, we're going to record this week's Jay's Sporting Goods podcast. So keep an ear out for that as well. Regardless, though, of how you listen or what you're listening, how you're listening, I do appreciate it very, very much. A lot of things that could take up your time these days as far as media and content consumption. So the fact you're hearing my voice, thank you. I do appreciate that. I've had the opportunity to run into a lot of interesting people over the years here behind this microphone and also behind the Outdoor Magazine TV camera when that existed. And Nick Ostroski is certainly one of the most interesting. Nick is a hardcore hunter. And when Nick decides to do something, he just does it. For example, a couple of years ago, he said, I think I want to go out west and go elk hunting. And he did. He just jumped in the truck and he went out west and he went elk hunting. He's also one of the few people to legally kill a Michigan wolf a few years ago when we had the season. Nick went to the UP. He found a wolf track. He got on that track. He followed that track. He walked the wolf down, and he killed it. He was very, very big into wild boar hunting here in Michigan a few years ago when the wild boar population was bigger. We'll talk more about that. And he's also a hardcore coyote hunter, primarily behind dogs as well. Nick, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Good morning, Mike. I'm fine, thank you.
Always a pleasure to talk with you. How's your winter going so far, Nick?
Well, I would prefer a little bit more snow. Inch every couple of days would be beautiful for hunting. It's warm as far as the farm aspect of it. It's beautiful for that, but I'm kind of looking forward to my later years is to devote more time to hunting, and it's kind of tough this year, this winter.
And man, you love to hunt, don't you, Nick?
Well, yeah, my wife believes that's true. I wish I could spend more time doing it. We'll see. We'll see how the winter.
So listen, tell me about coyote hunting behind dogs. I've had a lot of guys on the show here talk about, setting up and calling them, especially after dark these days. But you're a houndsman. You love to run with those guys, don't you?
Yeah. I guess it all started back when coons were worth a pile of money 30, 40 years ago. And I got me one hound, and I just love to go out at night. It's solitaire, by yourself, and you could kind of think about anything while you're out there with the hound and listening to that dog bark and treeing it. And I made a pile of money back then. And I just got another dog, and I got involved with some other people hunting bobcats, bear, then when the pigs come along, I was doing a lot of coyote hunting before the hogs come, the hounds. And the hogs was a kind of a plus because they're so close to home and there's so many of them at that time. And they did do a lot of damage to my cornfields. We had several of them right here on the property one summer almost every day, or towards, I guess it was more towards fall harvest time. But, just having the hounds, I guess you need to utilize them on as many things you can to get the biggest bang for your buck back out of them, because it's really not cheap as far as vet bills and training them and dog food throughout the year. It's just a beautiful thing.
You bring up the wild boars. Let's talk about it right now. For a while, you and your guys were real heavy into this, and you were the most effective wild boar hunters I knew of in the state. What's happened to that population? Has the number dropped off?
Well, in this area, it definitely has. I've talked to a few other houndsmen from around the state, and they've gotten a few too. It seems like the majority of them that I spoke with, we got more, but it might be because we were probably located the closest to supposedly the pen that they got out of in Midland. And then they sought the thickest, densest country travel route north, and it just happened to be close to my place. And it was just a given. I mean, it was winter time. The tracks were everywhere. They moved about so much that it seemed like there was an awful lot of them. They did breed pretty rapidly. I don't believe they were quite as efficient in breeding as what the biologists claim. From our experience, it seemed like for the most part they had only maybe 1 litter a year. And from what I read on the wild boars, the purebred Russians only did breed and have 1 litter a year. But the numbers, I don't believe, were there where they, into the thousands. We did see quite a few, but like I said earlier, they moved around so much. We found tracks 4 or 5 different places, many, many miles apart, but it was the same litter. We just chased them enough, figured out the travel route, intercepted their travel location, and picked them off one by one. We jump a group of 4 or 5 of them, and we stayed on them till dark, and we kept picking them off until we had none. And if we had 1 or 2 made it through the night, we'd try and start on them again the next morning, and they might be 8-10 miles away. But a plus side to that was they're pretty good eating too. A lot better than the cows.
So do you still hunt the boars? Can you even find enough out there to make it worth your while?
Honestly, I quit vigorously looking for them 2 years ago. I still have a bad habit of when I'm out wherever I'm at. A couple of days ago, I was out scouting for bobcats, and I'm still looking at every deer track and make sure it's not a pig, because there is one exclusive travel route right here close by, and it seemed like every pig that went up as far as Roscommon come through here. But no, for the last couple of years, I have not seen any. I haven't seen any rootings. I haven't heard of any. There's a few killed around the state here and there, but for the most part, I believe those small secluded pockets might be some actual domesticated pigs that did get loose,
Well, the DNR wanted hunters to wipe them out. They declared them an invasive species, and you guys sure did your part.
Well, we sure worked at it. It was a blast. We enjoyed doing it. Like I said, we all loved running behind hounds. I just happened to come across a couple of dogs that loved it on at least one occasion. Actually, it was New Year's Day. I had the best hound I had here we ended up getting that pig 3 weeks later, but the dog got caught by that pig and it ripped him up. He spent 3 weeks laid up. The 2 vets worked on him. I think it was New Year's Day. 2 vets worked on him all day and sewed him back together. But we did get just, satisfaction. We got that pig a few miles south actually crossing M61, 330 pounder.
Wow. But you got your reward, your just rewards on that one.
Yep.
Nick, hang tight, Nick. I got to take a break here. We're talking with Nick Ostroski. He is a noted houndsman and a hardcore hunter. He spent a lot of time chasing wild boars here in the central part of Michigan, Aranet County-ish, back when there were more pigs around. Thankfully, they're not. You'd have a hard time finding a wild boar in Michigan, from what I'm hearing now. Also runs bobcats. I didn't know about that. But the primary topic of conversation when we come back after the break, I want to talk to Nick about using hounds to chase coyotes. A very, very effective way to knock those critters down. And, we got too many coyotes in the state. Well, more with Nick Ostroski after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Sheboygan on Big Country Gold, WCBY, AM and FM, 1240 AM, 100.7 FM. You can hear us in Holland on WHTC, again, AM and FM, 1450 AM, 99.7 FM. And you can hear us in Port Huron on WPHM, 1380 AM. The segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Great Lakes Charter Training. If you've ever wanted to be a charter captain, I am convinced this is your best option. It's the way I went about getting my captain's license, and I could not be more satisfied with the job that Captain Mel Stackpool and his crew did for me. There are classes across the state going on this winter and spring. If you want to know more, go to the website, glctraining.com, glctraining.com. From that website, you can sign up and be taking that first step in getting your captain's license. They can give you the class, they can give you the Coast Guard exam, and they guarantee you will pass that exam. And for me, that is the very biggest benefit, or one of the biggest benefits from the guys at Great Lakes Charter Training. The website, glctraining.com. That's glctraining.com. Right now, we're talking with Michigan hunter and houndsman Nick Ostroski. Nick, what is the plan when you guys head out in the morning after coyotes with your dogs? Walk me through this process.
We ideally we hope for a fresh snow. Last few days here in my area, the snow has been so hard and crystallized that it can cut the dog's feet up. But if you have a fresh snow on top of that, and go out in the morning and generally we hunt just south of my place on some scattered farm fields and wood lots, and we'll try and isolate a track down to one section and cut the dogs in there, and usually it's a jump coyote right away. We get some shooters lined up in the perimeter and maybe some exit routes, and it can be over in a few minutes, or it could take the entire day. People miss, cars come along, the coyote turns around, or maybe on occasion they'll bay up on the dog. Generally, the bigger males, though, especially with breeding season coming on, them bigger males will lead you on a wild goose chase way back to where they come from 2 days earlier. But yeah, it's a blast. A guy needs to try that at least once. If you don't have hounds, run into some people and rub elbows with them and prove that you're a good shot and you won't shoot their dog, and maybe they'll invite you along, because it seems like we could always use an extra shooter. There's always that wily coyote that tends to slip out the other way, or in some instances, there can be 2 or 3 coyotes in a second, and so everybody will get some shooting.
Nick, from what I know of houndsmen, I believe as a group, as a whole, you guys are pretty friendly and pretty open and welcome to getting people involved in your sport.
Yeah, generally we are. The on the downside of that, there are some landowners that really don't know what you're doing, so it's best to get on a good rapport with them. Let them know what you're doing. For the most part, they'll they enjoy their deer hunting and they don't want the coyotes. Farmers, on the other hand, a lot of cash croppers prefer you leave the coyotes because the coyotes will take the deer and the deer eat their profits up. So it's kind of a give and take. But for the most part, the landowners will allow you on there, provided you've laid some prior groundwork that prove your worthiness.
Well, and speaking of landowners, and this is a complaint that I hear often about hound hunters is, they let their dogs loose and they run over private property and yada, yada, yada. You've heard that 100 times, I know.
Yeah, it only takes one hunter to do the wrong thing, and, it takes forever to repair the damage one hunter does. So you all pretty much need to work together to make the hunting more readily available for more people in the future. The landowners do control the show here. So we really need to abide by them. Open a gate, close a gate. Don't damage any property. If you do, apologize. For the most part, though, we just wait on the road, let the hound do the work, and just have to make sure that our shot isn't in the direct line of somebody or a house, and generally we're pretty good with that. We can either choose a caliber rifle or a shotgun with some heavy BB load and make it work. But it's still everybody. You got to have, in the excitement of it all, you got to have a clear head. You got to think. You got to think like a policeman. Be in control.
What kind of dogs are you running, Nick?
Right now, I've got blue ticks and plots. I personally prefer blue ticks, but over the course of the last 30, 35 years, I've had my best luck with one plot, and it was a phenomenal dog. And one of my close friends who's no longer with us, he said it's the best dog he ever saw. As far as nose, grittiness, I mean, it feared nothing. It even cost me $7,000 vet bill when he got into a bear in the UP. So it's a personal thing. Some people prefer walkers, some plots, some red ticks, some blue ticks. Hell, it could be anything. Black and tans. I got one black and tan, but it's like I said, it's a personal thing.
I didn't realize when you said that sometimes these coyotes will bay up. I didn't realize that happened. I mean, I knew bears would tree and such, but I thought a coyote was just going to keep running. I didn't realize they ever stood their ground.
Yeah, a lot of it depends on the animal, the size of the animal, and how well in shape your dogs are, and the snow. The snow gets deep. A dog's been running hard every day on coyote, and so he's like a cross-country runner, And that coyote will maybe only make a mad dash to catch his quarry once or twice a week. So that hound with longer legs, bigger animal, can catch that dog. And I know there's a few groups of hunters that don't even take a rifle with them. They let the dogs do all the work. Personally, I would rather have the coyote end quickly, you know.
Yeah. When you got dogs behind a coyote and they come past you, are the dogs right on his tail, or is there a good amount of distance? I mean, hundreds of yards between them.
Well, it depends on how long the chase has been going on. The longer the chase has been, the closer he gets. Some coyotes are sneaky and they can backtrack a few feet and then jump off trail, and it'll lose the dogs there, and he'll get ahead again. So it's pretty much like a military maneuver, depending on how smart and wily that coyote and how old he is and how big he is, how crafty he is,
and if he's been run by dogs before.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's another thing. But see, there are so many coyotes out in our everywhere. Actually, like I said, the other day I was out scouting for bobcats. And because I got a nephew that's got a young dog starting out, and it's showing a lot of promise. But I come across one bobcat track through the whole day, and I probably crossed 10 coyote tracks, and I jumped one. I actually walked up on it in the swamp, I didn't see it, but I could tell in the snow it was a fresh back and it was running.
Well, speaking of walking up on critters, I mean, the story you told me a few years ago about you walking down that wolf in the UP when we had that, one season of a limited wolf hunt, that was really impressive. If and when we get another Michigan wolf hunt, are you going to put in for a tag?
That's not a very smart question, Mike.
Why?
That should be a given.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to rush. Last time I remember, I was thinking about it a few days ago. The last time when I heard that, and they were going to have them available at Sunday at noon, and I just happened to be in West Branch cold trailing a bear that day, and I thought it'd be over by then, but we're still cold trailing. I left my dogs in the woods. My nephew and I raced into St. Helens, and I went into panic mode because I was afraid. The license agent could not figure out how to run it through. So they sent me to another location, and I was able to get it there, and I was so happy. Because, this was worldwide application, and they were only issuing 1,200 licenses. Little did I know there would still be a few left Monday morning. Well, I was going to wait. I wanted a wolf so bad, and it culminated so wonderfully that day. I mean, I tried predator calling. I tried sitting over a legal bait, and the reason I say that was because the first couple of wolves that were killed were actually killed over roadkill, and I was told by my legislature that wasn't the way it was supposed to go. But anyways, yeah, when I walked up on that wolf, I mean, I cut the track down into sections, typically like we do for coyote or pigs. We cut it down. We narrowed it down to the section that he was in, so I knew I wouldn't have to walk for miles because a wolf can travel over 25 miles a day, and I was not going to travel 25 miles in snow in the UP in November. And I couldn't do it then, and I know I couldn't do it today. But I narrowed it down, and just using what I knew about wolves, that they really didn't fear humans for the most part. And yeah, it was evident. I walked right up on a pack of them, and they stood there looking at me. And I thought, wow. I mean, I remember today, I said, coyotes. I said, kid. I said, wait a minute, you think these coyotes? So they were too big for coyotes. But I did the shot. And I'll tell you what, that was probably my crowning Michigan achievement, that wolf. I mean, I've killed some nice bucks, other things, but a wolf, I mean, only 23 were harvested.
I know, and you got one of them, Nick. How cool is that?
No, I had the taxidermist do it up. I got it. It's a centerpiece in my trophy room, and I love it. I welcome people to come over and look at it. It's a beautiful. Well, you got one in your house.
I've got one too, and they're a magnificent animal. And I hope you get a chance to go out legally after another Michigan wolf. I hope we have a hunt coming up.
I hope we do too. I hope everyone else can join me out there, and we'll work at it together. And this time we'll meet our quota.
All right, Nick. Always a pleasure. You're an interesting guy. I love hearing your stories, and I hope to talk with you again soon.
Hey, it's good being here.
All right, Nick Ostroski here on Outdoor Magazine. We'll take a break. When we come back, another Nick Green from MUCC, talking about a couple of issues that we should be aware of, and then we'll wrap the hour up with this week's Ask Avery segment. I think it's going to be another twofer coming up right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Traverse City on WTCM. That's 580 AM. You can hear us in Muskegon on WKBZ 1090 AM and in Newberry on WNBY 1450 AM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by the Linwood Beach Marina and Campground. Linwood Beach can be your year-round Saginaw Bay fishing destination and your Mid-Michigan Tracker and Angler Quest headquarters. Check them out online at linwoodbeachmarina.com. That's linwoodbeachmarina.com. While you're online, please check out my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com. and head over to mucc.org. That's the website of the Michigan United Conservation Clubs. By the way, if you want to save 25% on your MUCC membership or your renewal, use the promo code Mike, all caps, MIKE, and save 25% on your membership to what I think is a very, very good organization, and I am proud to be a member of MUCC myself. Nick Green is the Chief Information Officer for MUCC, joins us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Nick, welcome back.
Good morning, Mike.
Hey, listen, lots of things going on right now. I would think it would normally be kind of slow, but I'm getting a lot of good news, and primarily good news is what's out there now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we had some movement on the national invasive carp issue, so, this is something that has really kind of come to the forefront of national news, even though it kind of is regional and specific to our Great Lakes, but it's of great importance to our freshwater supply and certainly outdoor recreation here in Michigan. And then other great news kind of coming down late last week was that we should now have the ability to implement some cormorant control here in Michigan.
Ah, that's going to get people's attention. Tell me more about that.
It is. So in 2016, we had some lawsuits from Center for Biological Diversity. I think Audubon was in on that. Several other organizations sued the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on grounds that their environmental impact study regarding cormorants was not submitted correctly. So 5 years later now, we have an updated order that would allow the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or that allows state and tribal agencies under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to start depredation control on double-crested cormorants. And that's important for Michigan because we host about 55% of the United States breeding pairs. So cormorants can be very detrimental to fish populations, and infrastructure even. It is important to realize that cormorants are a native species. So they are native to Michigan. They're not invasive. However, when we do a lot of either salmon or perch stocking, things like that, walleye, these cormorants do quickly catch on. They learn to circle trucks, and as soon as those fish are dumped in the water, they're diving down and eating them. So this will give the state and tribal agencies a way to kind of protect their investment in the fishery, and hopefully it will make some inroads in our fish populations as we move through this.
So and it may be too early to know this, but will there be a season on these things, or will it be under a special permit, or what?
Yes, so this is a federal permit. We're getting lots of questions regarding hunters actually being able to hunt them. That is not the case. We don't expect that to be the case. Cormorants are a migratory bird, therefore they are managed by the federal government. So in my knowledge, there are no states in the United States that allow hunting for cormorants. It is strictly a governmental agency or tribal agency effort. So we will not have a season on them, at least in the foreseeable future. But it is a complex issue that we expect to kind of go through growing pains here as we move through it, and hopefully we won't run into an issue like we ran into in 2016 where that depredation permit was revoked.
Well, that's always the case, isn't it, right? I mean, the anti-hunting groups like to look at actions like this and pick them apart and find some kind of they don't come right out and say we're against it, but they find some little legal issue that they think was done wrong to pin their hopes on.
That's been the case with so many conservation issues. It's often not on the actual biological, standing of the permit. It's generally a lawsuit on paperwork. And that's happened with wolves, cormorants, lots of national issues. So hopefully this is something that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service did their due diligence. We expect they did, and it's something that would stand up if it is again challenged in court.
So cormorants are hopefully going to be controlled to some extent. We got good news on the Brandon Road Lock and Dam for Asian carp. The Michigan pheasant stamp was approved. I mean, we're kind of on a roll here, aren't we?
We are. 2020 was a great year for a lot of conservation issues, a lot of issues that are close to our heart. We had some very great bipartisan, legislation passed in the middle to late part of 2020. So hopefully we can continue that role into 2021 as the new administration takes over. And we start to learn who the key players will be.
Nick, appreciate you guys in Lansing there keeping an eye on things for us. The website, mucc.org. Also, the latest edition of your magazine. It came out a few weeks ago, but, man, it's beautiful.
Thank you so much. We are proud of that one, and I'm actually deep into the spring one now, so that'll be going to the printer here shortly.
I will look forward to seeing that as well. Nick Green from MUCC, the website, mucc.org. Feel free to use the promo code Mike, all caps, to save 25% on your MUCC membership or your renewal. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. When we come back, this week's Ask Avery segment brought to you by our friends from Security Credit Union. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. So glad to have you along with us. You know, you can hear the show on AM and FM stations across the great state of Michigan, including I didn't forget about you. I'm still here. Including WSGW in Saginaw. Now that's WSGW FM and AM 100.5 790. Appreciate working with those guys. And Lansing WILS 1320 AM, and in Houghton Lake the Twister 92.1 WTWS. The Ask Avery segment is brought to you each week by Security Credit Union. They love to work with outdoorsmen and women, and they can help you with your next outdoor adventure. Check them out online at securitycu.org. That's securitycu.org. A couple of questions this week. One of them sent in as an email from Jim Goss about Michigan's moose population. And I got thinking about this because my Outdoor Magazine minutes for next week revolve around the Michigan moose population. And I'm not sure that I have talked about this before, and if I have, I apologize. But this Michigan moose situation is interesting, and I'm going to talk about Michigan turkeys as part 2 of this week's Ask Avery here in just a minute. Moose, of course, are native to Michigan. But back in 1985, the DNR, some sportsmen's groups, including Safari Club put a lot of money into this. They did a project called the Moose Lift, and they went to Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario. And they got some moose. And the way they did this was they went out in helicopters with guys hanging out of the sides of these things. The group was called the Kiwi Cowboys. They hung out of the sides of helicopters, and they shot the moose with net guns, meaning it shot a net that went over the moose. The moose got tangled up in it, and it fell into the snow. Then biologists jumped out of these things. They tranquilized the moose. On the bulls, they cut off the racks. They put them in this net. They brought them back to the Algonquin Provincial Park headquarters. They put them in crates. They loaded them on trucks, and they trucked them back to Michigan. They went to Pashiki Grade near Marquette, and they let them go. In 1985, there were 29 animals, 10 bulls and 19 cows. And I think that first group had one very famous young bull called Gulliver, who just wandered all over the UP, it seems like. And the cool part, I think the absolute coolest part about this whole thing is, do you know how we got those moose? We traded the Ontario government turkeys for them. I think we came out on top of this one. We gave them some turkeys, and we got moose. But the DNR wasn't really happy with the way this was going or the number of animals that we have. So back in 1987, they went back and they did it again. This time they got 30 more, 15 bulls and 15 cows. Now, I covered this thing on both ends. And in 85, I went to Algonquin Provincial Park and followed the moose back to Michigan. In 1987, went back and shot video of them releasing the moose again. In the mid-'80s, we were told we would have 1,000 of the animals in the UP by the year 2000. That didn't happen. The latest moose survey numbers show that we have roughly 500 moose in the core area, and there are a few more scattered in the outlying area. And, of course, Isle Royale has its own population, but 500 moose in the core area. So we don't have a moose hunt. Some of the biologists, some of the experts in the DNR say even with this roughly 500 population right now that we could support a very limited moose season. I don't see that happening in the near future, at least. But why did we not get the 1,000 animals by the year 2000? That's like the big question, and I'm not sure there's a real good answer for that. I haven't been able to come up with an answer. It wasn't brainworm. It wasn't wolves. It wasn't poachers. It wasn't car moose accidents. So what was it? I'm not really sure on that, and I've asked that question a lot. The second part of this week's Ask Avery, Bob Scriver sent me an email talking about turkey permits here in Michigan. He says, of the limited quota hunts, the ones you apply for during January right now for $5, he says, we've never sold out of those. And yet the DNR continues to charge $5 for the privilege of applying for those quotas, even though he says they've never been sold out. I always put in for ZZ, the private land Southern Michigan hunt, which last year actually sold out for the first time, too. He says millions of dollars have been generated on this. He thinks it's a disservice by the DNR to continue to charge that fee. Maybe it's time to start to rethink how we get our Michigan turkey tags, because for the most part, you can go in now and buy a turkey tag, at least you could until this last year, over the counter for anywhere, because there were always tags left over. Maybe it's time to rethink this whole thing. Although I'm not willing to take that chance. I love turkey hunting so much that I'll go in and go ahead and pay the $5 extra and put in for ZZ to make sure I have a tag, because I don't want to take the chance. Interesting question, Bob. I will follow up more on that, but I appreciate you bringing it up, and I appreciate the folks from Security Credit Union for making each week's Ask Avery segment possible. You can send me an email to mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com or hit me up on any of the social media outlets. And maybe you'll be a part of next week's. Richard Smith coming up after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine.
Time now for Michigan's #1 outdoor radio show, Mike Avery's Outdoor Magazine. Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Jay's Sporting Goods, the Yider Insurance Group, Forward Corporation and T.R. McTaggart, Primal Tree Stands, Angler Quest Pontoons and Polarcraft Boats, Shadow Hunter Blinds, Security Credit Union, Garber Chevrolet, and by Michigan Brand Meats. Now, here's Mike Avery.
Well, thank you, Ken Hunter, for that introduction, and welcome to hour number 3 of this week's Outdoor Magazine show right here on the Outdoor Magazine Radio Network. Glad to have you along with us as we continue our celebration of the outdoor lifestyle here in the great state of Michigan and occasionally beyond. A celebration and encouragement, a conversation about hunting and fishing and shooting and trapping and these wonderful outdoor activities that so many of us are absolutely addicted to. It's more than a hobby. It's more than a pastime. It's more than a sport, right? For many of us, it's an absolute way of life. We were brought up in this lifestyle. It's something that was done in our family generations before, and hopefully will continue on for many generations into the future. But the the landscape has changed, right? There's no doubt about that. Across the state, there are more non-hunters and anglers than there are people who participate. Now, that's going to vary from, region to region, area of the state to area of the state. Certainly, when you compare the UP to the southeast corner of the Lower Peninsula, you've got a whole different ball game going on there. But overall, our way of life is not as entrenched as it used to be. But this past year, one good thing to come from a year that was really bad in a lot of ways is we're seeing more interest in the outdoors. Hunting and fishing license sales are up. People are more interested in the outdoors. In fact, to the point where it's sometimes hard to get some of the gear, some of the ammo we want to enjoy our outdoor activities. But that'll work its way out. I'm cautiously optimistic. Speaking of the UP, our guy in the UP, Richard P. Smith, is a very interesting person. He's an expert when it comes to the outdoors. He's an expert, especially in the areas of bear hunting and whitetail hunting. And it's always a pleasure to check in with Richard P. Smith as we're doing right now. Richard, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, Mike. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And the first thing I got to ask you is, how did your deer season go?
Well, it could have been better. It was almost excellent. I should have filled both my buck tags with adult bucks. I shot a 6-point on November 17th that should have been an 8. In fact, I thought he had 8 points when I shot him. He had a decent rack. He just didn't have any brow tines. That's why he only had 6 points. I shot him at noon on the 17th. He came to check a scrape. And then I dropped him in his tracks with my 30-06. And toward the end of the season, as a big 10-point showed up on my trail cameras at my stands, one of my stands, and I set out to try and get him, and I had a chance at him, and I blew it. I wounded the deer, something that I feel really bad about. I feel terrible about it. In fact, I've never wounded a deer that I've not recovered with my rifle until this fall. It was a 4 or 5 year old deer, a nice deer, had an 18-inch spread, 6 points on one side, 4 on another. And what's really disturbing about it, I wish I would have had a do-over to do it again. I watched the buck approach, and I had camera photos of him on my bait at the stand a number of times during legal shooting time, and I figured he was going to come to the bait, and I had plenty of time. But I had also put out a tarsal gland from the 6-point I killed earlier, and that's what the buck was focused on, the tarsal gland from the other buck. And when he got to the tarsal gland and saw there wasn't a deer attached to it, he freaked out and trotted back toward where he'd come from. And he stopped just before he went on sight, angling away, and I tried to put a bullet in to angle forward in his chest cavity, and as I shot, he disappeared. And I found blood right away when I climbed down from my tree stand, had a steady blood trail, but we spent 2 days trailing this deer. In fact, a cousin of mine brought a dog the next day to trail the deer, and we followed it for another 3 miles, and it went up a mountain. So we determined I made a non-fatal hit on the deer.
Yeah.
I think I just hit muscle on the deer, and normally it would be a non-fatal hit. However, with the number of wolves we have in the UP now, when you've got a deer with any type of injury, that makes them more vulnerable for wolves. And in fact, a guy who knew that I wounded this deer found the remains of the animal on December 8th, where it had been pulled down and killed and eaten by wolves. The only thing that remained of that deer was the head and antlers. That's it. They had eaten everything else.
It's so hard for a hunter to talk about a situation like this, Richard. You could have chosen just not to share the story, and it's got to be painful to tell that story publicly. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, there's a lesson there for me and others to try and be as careful as you can when taking your shot. And I thought I was. However, there were some branches. My bullet might have been deflected. As I wrote a book on tracking wounded deer, and one of the important aspects, one of the things I've written in it is nobody likes to wound a deer. Everybody strives not to. And I certainly am in that category. But sometimes, due to the many variables we face as hunters, it happens. And that's what happened in this case. And that's a reality of hunting.
Sure.
And what makes me feel even worse is the fact I made that deer more vulnerable to wolves that killed it. If it weren't for wolves, I'm confident that deer would have recovered and been there again next year. And that's a message I want to get out to people, that wounding deer with hits that normally would have been non-fatal does no longer apply when wolves are present.
Richard, I just don't think people who live downstate, including myself, can comprehend the impact that wolves have had on the UP deer herd, at least in some areas.
Yeah, and it's getting worse. The wolf, even though the DNR estimates the number of adult wolves in the population every other winter, their numbers are stated clearly as a bare minimum. And they clearly underestimate the total number of wolves out there, and they're becoming more common, more visible, and having more impacts on our wildlife. And not just deer, they impact other species too. I think they're preying on black bears as well, and other animals.
Well, let's hope that now that the feds have cleared the way, that we can work our way through the legal minefield that's going to be out there, and hopefully we can have another hunt sometime in the near future.
Yes, and one thing that's very important when we do move forward with a hunting, we need to include trapping as a means of harvesting, managing wolves in the Upper Peninsula. Trapping is far more effective at catching wolves than hunting is. As we found out during that one hunt we had, success was very, very low through hunting, and trapping will increase the opportunity to better manage the wolves we currently have. And we're not talking about eliminating wolves. We're talking about managing their numbers, getting them to manageable levels.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Get the trappers involved there. I think we took something like 23 wolves with hunters, and that was, our Michigan hunters didn't have experience hunting wolves. They didn't really know how to do it. But bring the trappers in there. Boy, those guys will take care of things. Go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say, wolves are very good at surviving and avoiding hunters. They're hard to kill.
I saw that in Ontario myself. The toughest critter I ever hunted was a wolf. And up there in Ontario, they had a healthy fear of man, and I'd like to see us be able to have a wolf hunt in Michigan to at least put a fear of man back in the wolves in the UP.
And to better manage them.
Absolutely. Just a side note, were you able then to take possession of the skull of that buck?
I haven't gotten it yet, but Richard Oja from Dollar Bay is the hunter who recovered the antlers and head from that buck, and he did offer the antlers to me because he knew I'd wounded it, and he asked to see a trail camera photo of the buck just to confirm it was the same deer, and it was. So I may get them. He did offer the antlers to me, which was nice of him.
A lot of things I want to follow up on, Richard. You talked about a 30-06. We got to take a quick break here, but when we come back, I want to follow up on the 30-06. The 6-point that you had, I want to talk to you about, would that buck, I don't know the age of it, we'll find out, but would it ever have had brow tines? And then also some possible legislation coming up and some changes in deer management in Michigan. So, Richard, we got a lot to talk about. Can you stick around for a few minutes?
Sure.
All right. We're talking with Richard P. Smith. You can find more about him on his website, richardpsmith.com, richardpsmith.com. You know Richard. He's been around the outdoor scene here in Michigan for a long, long time. A whitetail hunting expert, a black bear hunting expert, like no others, and his website, richardpsmith.com, richardpsmith.com. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine Show. Lots more coming up, including, as we get closer to the end of the show, a great pike recipe from wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar. That's coming up this week right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Houghton Lake on 98.5 WUPS, a blowtorch of a station, meaning a powerful station that reaches a long, long way. I appreciate that. You can also hear some Manistee on WMLQ 97.7 FM. This segment of Outdoor Magazine is brought to you by Suspension Max. Suspension Max is the company I went to when I got my new Garber Chevy Silverado. And a beautiful truck, absolutely beautiful truck, as all of the vehicles are these days. But you know what I'm talking about. All the trucks come from the factory with the front end down. I don't know if it's a safety thing. I don't know if it's a mileage thing, or if they just build it that way because they assume you're gonna fill the back of the truck up with sand or blocks or something and compress the rear springs and make it ride level. But how many of us actually do that these days? So your truck is spending 99.99% of the time going down the hill, going down the road, looking like it's running downhill. So I went to Suspension Max. They put a leveling kit on that Silverado, 2.5 inches in the front, 1.5 years on the back. It brought it up nice. I could put bigger tires under it. It's a nice ride. It's nice and level, and they can do the same thing for you, regardless of the make of the truck that you're driving these days. Check them out online at suspensionmax.com, and Max is MAXX, suspensionmax.com. While you are online, I would encourage you to check out my website, MikeAveryOutdoors.com, and head over to richardpsmith.com. richardpsmith.com, of course, the website of noted outdoor writer and hunting expert Richard P. Smith, who is with us now on the Outdoor Magazine phone line. Richard, that first buck you shot this year, you said it was a 6-point. I don't know how old it was, but would that buck, given enough years, eventually have turned into an 8-point? You said it didn't have any brow tines.
That's correct. I don't think so, Mike. I think it's a genetic trait. I've killed other bucks, older bucks, that were absent brow tines as well in the same county. So I don't think he would have grown brow tines at a later date. It's a genetic trait, and I've heard other parts of the UP that trait exists as well, that even older age bucks don't have brow tines.
All right, how about the concept of once a spike, always a spike? Are there certain bucks that no matter how many years you give them will remain a spike?
No, I've never seen a situation like that. I've seen plenty of spikes become 6 points and 8 points in their second year, their second sets of antlers. And 8 points isn't unusual for the second set of antlers for spikes up here.
Also, you were talking about your deer gun of choice is a 30-06. Man, other than maybe a 30-30, a 30-06 is like the time-tested Michigan deer gun, isn't it?
It is certainly one of the more popular ones, and it's worked extremely well for me.
Well, yeah, I was reading one of your posts or something, and you said the majority of bucks you shoot with that 30-06, there's not much of a tracking job.
No. Very seldom they go any distance.
We had Tom Campbell of Woods and Water News on in the opening hour, and he talks about the February edition coming out, and you've got a couple of pieces in there, including one piece where you talk about the possibility of mandatory deer check-in here in Michigan. Tell me more about that, Richard.
Yeah, I was participated in a Zoom meeting for the UP Sportsman's Alliance meeting, and Ashley Ottery, the DNR, one of the DNR specialists from Gaylord, was on the Zoom meeting as well, and she mentioned that the DNR plans on going to a mandatory deer registration in the state in 2022. She said hunters have been asking the department to do that type of thing for years, and they think that's the way to go in the future. However, they still are unsure how to get everybody the highest response rate as possible. There's some Amish communities, they don't have electronics, and getting those people how they can register deer. I'm hoping that once DNR offices are open again, that hunters can bring deer to DNR offices to register them like they used to in the past, and have a phone-in option as well. But the system isn't, all the bugs aren't worked out yet.
Well, this is very interesting because, yes, a certain percentage of Michigan hunters have been asking for this for a long time. And when I brought it up to a biologist before, I said, look, it works in other states like Ohio. And they said, yeah, but even if you have a mandatory check-in, there's no guarantee. And they claimed at the time that that they thought the system currently in place was as accurate as a mandatory check-in. So I wonder what's changed.
I don't know. Monetary situation is probably part of it. Ashley mentioned in her comments that this new licensing system the department adopted a year or two ago, I guess last year, they started a new licensing system, electronic, that has the capability to register deer electronically. However, as I'm sure you're aware, that system failed on November 14th, the day before gun season, when many people wanted to buy deer licenses.
Yeah.
If you have a failure like that when it comes to a bunch of hunters trying to register deer, and we lose all that data, that's of no value.
Yeah. And I would think in today's world, there's got to be some kind of a thing where you could just scan your tag with your phone and send the information to the DNR, but the hunter has to be willing to do it.
Exactly. And when Ashley brought up mandatory registration, there were a number of people who raised questions about how that's going to work, because one guy commented, we go to camp for a week and we stay there for a week. How is mandatory registration? And they don't have internet access at the camp.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an inconvenience. That's certainly one of the main things that a lot of hunters who've asked for mandatory registration don't recognize is there is between 7 and 30% noncompliance with mandatory registrations in the states where it does exist. So you don't get a total count on deer harvested. There's no system that everybody complies with.
Absolutely. There are some other things going on as far as some potential changes in our deer regulations, Richard.
Yeah, the DNR finally recommended to eliminate hunter's choice option in the Upper Peninsula and to allow crossbows during December for bow hunters in the UP, and to return antlerless deer as legal targets for bow hunters throughout the UP. Which I was pleased to see. And these are recommendations for 2021. However, the two UP natural resources commissioners have made amendments to eliminate those proposed changes, and I'm hoping those amendments don't pass.
I just don't comprehend not allowing crossbows in the late season. That makes absolutely no sense to me.
That's correct. It makes no sense, and especially since the DNR has data that shows success rates among crossbow hunters and vertical bow hunters are very close. There's very little difference. And vertical bows are legal during the December bow season, and they have been since 1968 when it started.
Yeah.
And the harvest is very low in December. There's very little participation compared to other seasons.
Speaking of crossbows, I'm a big fan of crossbows, as I know you are as well. Did you see, I think it was Excalibur, just announced they have a new crossbow called a dual fire or dual strike or something? Richard, It shoots 2 arrows, 2 bolts at once. Wow.
I saw that. And who needs it? Why? If you can't hit him with 1 arrow, how are you going to hit him with 2?
And now Raven, their new crossbow, they're marketing it as your next rifle. I'm a big crossbow fan, but I think there's going to become a point where we're going to have to look at, how far are we going to go with it.
Exactly, and that advertising is playing right into the hands who of two hunters who claim that crossbows are a gun,
Yep.
or like a gun, and that's not true, of course. But as you say, the way they're going, they're making it more efficient and raising more concerns about their use.
Yeah. But if the goal is a quick, clean, humane killing shot, I mean, I guess anything that takes us in that direction has to be looked at in, with that reference, a favorable light.
Yes, but hunters have to decide for themselves what's going to work. If they don't sell many crossbows that shoot 2 arrows, they'll realize it's not needed.
Yeah. So what else is going on, Richard?
Well, in regard to this proposal by the DNR to eliminate hunter's choice in the UP, I just want to point out that I've spent a lot of time researching this issue, and I've made a list of the UP buck harvest from 1998 through 2019 to compare the number of older age bucks bagged under hunter's choice since 2008 compared to prior. And the numbers clearly show that hunters harvest more older age bucks when one buck tag is unrestricted on UP combination licenses versus both tags being restricted. And in fact, the number of older age bucks has declined in hunter harvest in UP since 2008. In fact, it's declined dramatically under those regulations. And I have the data. It's DNR data I took from DNR reports to confirm that.
I feel like anecdotally what I hear from hunters across the UP is the size of the herd in general is just not what it was. I talk to people who say that, hey, listen, I spent a week in the woods every day and never saw a deer.
Right, and hunter's choice regulations are responsible for that by trying to carry too many deer through our severe winters. When you've got too many deer going into the winter, you're going to lose more during the winter, and those deer are going to damage the winter habitat before they die, reducing the carrying capacity of that winter range for future years. So our winter habitat can carry fewer deer than they did prior to 2008 because of efforts to try and carry too many. It's very simple if you look at the numbers and understand deer management. One thing I wanted to point out, too, I've been meaning to mention, I produced a video on a year in the life of an albino buck, and it's on YouTube that I posted there. If anybody wants to look at it, they can just Google either my name or a year in the life of an albino buck.
Well, on that note, Richard, listen, we got to take a break, but I would like to have you stick around and offer you the coveted third segment if you've got the time.
Sure, that sounds great.
Right. See, Richard, he led me right into that. He knew I couldn't let him go now. So the coveted third segment coming up with Richard P. Smith here on Outdoor Magazine. If you want to learn more, the website, richardpsmith.com, richardpsmith.com. And if you check out my website, I would appreciate that as well, mikeaveryoutdoors.com. And you can always get in touch with me. Send me an email to mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com. More coming up after the break right here on Outdoor Magazine. You can hear the Outdoor Magazine show in Ludington on News 97, 98, 98.7 WLDN. And, of course, on WSGW in Saginaw, AM and FM, 790 AM, 100.5 FM. The show airs Sunday morning from 9 till noon on both stations now. I am in the studios of WSGW along with Charlie Rood, who is helping me with this week's show, doing a wonderful job as always as he turns and waves to the adoring crowd. We have people lined up here in the parking lot. They want to get a look at Charlie today, and I can see why. He's quite a guy, and I appreciate his help. This segment of Outdoor Magazine brought to you by Wilds Plumbing and Heating. From plumbing, heating, air conditioning, sump pumps, ductwork cleaning, you name it, the folks from Wilds can keep the mechanics of your house running smoothly. Check them out online at wildsplumbingandheating.com. That's what I do, wildsplumbingandheating.com. We're talking now with hunting expert, whitetail expert, black bear expert, Richard P. Smith. His website, richardpsmith.com. Richard, you teased me before the break about this video of a year in the life of an albino deer. How in the heck did you accomplish that?
Well, we've got genetics favoring albinism here in Marquette due to the fact we had a an adult albino buck that was part of a captive deer herd at Presque Isle Park in the city. They took the fence down from that enclosure, let the deer roam free, and many of those deer had the genetics favoring albinism from that adult buck that was in that pen, and it spread throughout the city. So I've seen a number of albino fawns when they've been born in the city, different places, and this one particular albino buck born to a doe, it was the second albino buck she had in a row, 2 years in a row. And I knew they lived in a small patch of thick cover in the city, and I spent as much time as I could photographing that fawn with her mother. And the doe had a normally colored buck fawn also, besides the albino. And I was lucky enough to photograph those deer throughout that buck's first year of life. Unfortunately, the buck was hit by a car when he was almost a year old, when he was just starting to grow his antlers.
This may be a stupid question, but when you've got an albino in a family group, and I realize this is starting to sound like Walt Disney, but do the other deer react to that albino any differently at all?
No, not as long as it's part of the herd to begin with as a fawn. These albino fawns that I've seen that are part of the herd from birth are accepted, and there's not a problem. It's when you introduce an albino to a herd that isn't used to that color variation that there's a problem. That albino buck that was in the deer pen at Marquette was actually born in the wild near Rapid River in Delta County. The DNR darted that buck and brought it to the pen. That herd in that pen wasn't used to albino deer. They actually tried to kill that deer. The caretaker had to separate it from the other deer so they wouldn't kill it until they got used to it.
So they do make a distinction that it does look different than the other ones.
Yes, they do. When it's not a normal part of their herd.
Gotcha. Well, you've got quite a history of walking with whitetails, photographing and videotaping whitetails, and black bears as well.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I produced a DVD titled Walking with Whitetails, a 90-minute DVD that has some unique behavior of whitetails that I've been able to capture by walking with those animals and them accepting me and trusting me. I've got some unique video that way.
Well, you've captured a lot of unique video and images over the years. So, Richard, what's next on your agenda coming up? Are you a turkey hunter at all?
I have used to turkey hunt quite a bit, but I haven't in recent years. I took a long-beard, I forget what year it was, to complete my Grand Slam for commemorative bucks of Michigan. One representative of each species that they have records for that qualifies for state records. After I finished that Grand Slam, I haven't really turkey hunted much because we don't have a lot of turkeys around Marquette.
Yeah. That Grand Slam, that's a CBM deal, right? And then you have to have you got to have an elk in there too, don't you?
Yep, exactly. Elk, deer, bear, and turkey, one of each that qualifies for state records.
Well, that's quite an accomplishment.
I was the second person in the state to achieve that Grand Slam, and certainly it takes a lifetime of hunting in order to do so, and being very lucky in drawing an elk permit. That's one of the toughest ones. And then once you draw a permit, you've got to take a bull that qualifies for state records as well.
Now, does this all have to happen in the same year?
No.
Oh, thank God.
It would be almost impossible. Someone who accomplished it in the same year, it would be very unique.
Well, exactly. That's what I was thinking as well. All right, Richard, listen, always a pleasure. I appreciate you keeping an eye on things and checking in from the UP. And I love your perspective and your insight into what's going on as far as whitetail management, the NRC, the DNR, and all other such things. And always a pleasure.
All right, nice talking to you too, Mike.
Same here. Richard P. Smith is the man. His website is richardpsmith.com, richardpsmith.com. I first met Richard, well, I knew of Richard like we all do, right? And you know of Richard P. Smith because he's an icon in the outdoor industry here in Michigan. But I met him for the first time. I was introduced to him by my mentor, the now late Pete Jonas, when I was working at TV5 in Saginaw. And I remember meeting Richard at a Michigan Outdoor Writers Association conference, and he took us out to a dump because at the time open dumps were legal in the UP. because I wanted to get video of a bear. I wanted to see my first bear. So, people are out there in their vehicles watching bears, and Richard says, well, we're not going to watch them from the vehicle. Let's get out. Let's get out and go for a walk and go over and see him. And I was scared to death of that animal, and I thought it was so cool that Richard wasn't afraid of him, and he knew how to act and react around that bear. And from then on, I've had a lot of respect for Richard. We'll take a break here in the Outdoor Magazine show. When we come back, we'll wrap up the show with another guy I have a lot of respect for, wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar, coming up right here on Outdoor Magazine. Welcome back to Outdoor Magazine. My name is Mike Avery. So glad to have you along with us. This is something we do for 3 hours every week on broadcast stations across the great state of Michigan, talking about the history and tradition of the outdoor lifestyle. Podcast also available anywhere that you get your podcasts from. And one thing you can count on, whether it's the broadcast version of the radio show or the podcast, is there is a very, very, a very good chance we'll wrap up each week's show with wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar. And guess what? I'm not going to let you down this week. We're going to do it once again. David, welcome back.
Hi, Mike. How are you today?
Wonderful. As we are sitting here in the studio, actually, it's a pretty nice day. It looks like the sun wants to come out. And Dave, it's warm. It doesn't feel like it's been much of a winter so far.
You're right. I was out earlier today, and man, oh, man. It was great. I just had a lighter jacket on, not my heavy-duty stuff.
Yeah,
but it ain't making too much ice, is it?
No, I was going to say not good news for the folks who love snow or for the people who want lots of ice. And speaking of ice, how about our friends ice fishermen? You got a recipe for us?
I do. You and I had talked earlier in the week about pike spearing. It's pretty exciting. As a kid, I used to do it all the time with my dad. He just loved it. He made his own spears. He was a tool grinder for Buick and did a lot of government work.
I bet there was a few spears came out of that Buick shop.
Oh, my dad's workshop, he had welders and all of that stuff. And I still got all of his spears and stuff. I've been thinking of do it again. But anyways, we used to go below the dam in Frankenmuth there on the south side, just below the dam, when they had a dam there instead of the fish ladder thing. There used to be quite a shelf of ice that used to form all along on there. It used to get real thick, and man, we really got a lot of pike out of there.
Right there in the river.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, on the south side, just below the dam, where the spillway was, the tailwaters, And we got a lot of nice pike. And so, anyway, what you want to do is the bigger ones, you want to trim the belly fat off, skin them real deep, take the red meat, the lateral line off. That seems to be a little bit strong, like all fish, not just pike. But pike have Y bones. And so you're going to have to trim around them a lot if you'd like boneless fish. And with a real sharp fillet knife, you can kind of feel where they are, and you kind of curve around, and get that out. And the smaller fish, of course, are a little less strong. And the big ones, you want a heartier sauce for, a different way of preparing it. You could make strips, like for deep frying. After you bone it out, you could Cajun it, put Cajun on it, and the dry, wet, dry batter with Drake's, some beer batter, dry, wet, dry, and deep fry them. That would just be wonderful, even the big ones. The smaller ones, I would say, trim them all up, get the bones out, take a little paprika, that lemon pepper, and white wine and butter and some lemon on it. Bake it. Man, it comes out great. You can blacken the fish. They come out just outrageous blackened. This time of the year, to me, pike tastes very, very good. Summertime, I'm not too keen on the pike or the crappies even, that kind of a fish. And so if we got time, we could do the Orleans recipe, the New Orleans recipe, if we have time. Michael.
I think we got time if you get to it. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go fast.
Yeah.
So you want about 8 to 10 ounces of boneless, skinless, trimmed up, real good fillet per person. You're going to need a can of artichoke hearts that are quartered, about a package 12 ounce of mushroom sliced thin, a third of a cup of onions, a couple of eggs beaten up, a little bit of flour, a cup of flour, about 3/4 of a stick of butter if you're going to do this for 4 people. half a cup of dry white wine, like a Chablis, Chardonnay, a little bit of lemon to your taste, and if you want it Cajun, by all means do that. Take the fish, dredge it in flour, dip it in the eggs in a nice hot pan, a little bit of oil, brown it on both sides. So when you turn out, you want to start it so that the skin side is up when you're done flipping it that one time. And basically all the ingredients, the white wine, mushrooms, lemon, butter, artichoke hearts. Cover it up, bring it up to a boil, and then turn the heat down a little bit, uncover it until it gets nice, thick, and creamy. And like I say, this time of the year, pike tastes great, To me, I love it. So,
well, yeah, they come out of that cold water. They got a nice texture to them, too.
They do. They firm up a whole lot. To me, in the spring, in the summertime when the water's real warm and pike are real active, they do have a tendency to get to me mushy, and a little musky kind of taste to a musty,
Mm-hmm.
But with this time of the year, they're great. It's a great table fare. You can't go wrong. Save them.
So it's
ups are sparing.
It's a twofer this week, a 2-for-1 on the wild game recipes from Chef Dave Minar.
Well, thank you.
All right, Dave, always a pleasure. We'll talk to you next week, my friend.
Appreciate it. Everybody get out there and have fun on the ice. It's not going to be too safe for a while again.
Words of advice from wild game chef extraordinaire Dave Minar, a big part of the Outdoor Magazine show. As are you, because if you weren't listening, there'd be no reason for me to do this. And then I don't know what I would do. I'd have to go out and get a real job or something. And at this point in my life, I don't even know what I would do. So I appreciate the fact that you're listening to the show, that you're listening to the podcast, that you're watching the social media videos, the social media posts. You can find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Twitter, and our Wednesday Night Lives every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock will go out to the Facebook page, YouTube, Twitter, and Vimeo as well. You can always reach me via email, mike@mikeaveryoutdoors.com, and the website is mikeaveryoutdoors.com. My name is Mike Avery, and I will talk with you next time right here on Outdoor Magazine.